Hello and welcome to the pharmacy self-assessment for the Community Pharmacy API Builder. My name is Shanna O'Connor. I'm faculty at Idaho State University, and this material has been prepared in conjunction with Megan Smith. The goals for this particular session are to help do a bit of brainstorming and a bit of reflection regarding where the pharmacy that you are looking to have students at is in terms of service development, and to try and set the foundation for how we might be able to use students to help promote enhanced practice development, enhanced service development at your specific pharmacy. In order to complete this series, there's some things that you need. The first is time. The recorded amount of time for this does not include the time for you to complete activities. I'm going to be asking you to pause the video. And so it's estimated that you'll need about 30 to 40 minutes to complete this series. As we get more information from pharmacy owners and pharmacy preceptors, we'll update that in the description section. So number one, time. If you don't have that much time, I would highly encourage you to maybe put a pin in this and try and come back to it, recognizing that the goal is to really have tangible work put into the worksheet. So ideally you're in a quiet area and kind of have your thinking cap on to be able to reflect about your particular pharmacy. The second things you need are a little bit easier. You need worksheet 1 and some sort of writing utensil. I have a pen, but it could be a pencil. I mean, it could be a crayon. You're not turning this in. This is what worksheet 1 looks like. It is titled Advanced Community API Pharmacy Self-Eval, but in the event that we are changing the title, this is kind of the one that you're looking at. It is two-sided. Ideally, you have it either printed off or in a mechanism that you can edit it, whatever works best for you. But this is kind of the two-sided version of this worksheet. So I'm going to be going back and forth between our slides and this worksheet so everybody can be on the same page. Okay, so in section 1, what we are doing is thinking about the pharmacy as it currently exists and just listing the services that are currently offered. So here in this worksheet, just in this service title area, you're just listing the services that you currently offer. I've got some that are fairly common that are designed just to get you started in this fairly straightforward exercise. But any service that is non-dispensing that you offer, you can kind of go ahead and list here. If there's a service that is listed that you offer, you can just give it a circle. And then there's 10 spaces for additional services that you could potentially be offering. An example I think that's not listed is pharmacogenomics testing services. So if you offered that service, you would just write it in here and try and make this as comprehensive as possible for services you currently are offering. If you can go ahead and pause the video and complete that section, we are going to take kind of the next step from there. Okay, welcome back. So we've completed section 1, just that one column of what are the list of services that we're offering. The next version, and this is very, very important to put some thought into, is if you could have that service optimized or in its highest caliber or perfect version, maybe not perfect version, but optimal version, what would that look like? So for each one of the services that you have circled, please think about these questions. So what would streamlined workflows for delivery of the service look like? What would a streamlined workflow for documentation of the service look like? Who on your team maybe positions? So is it an intern? Is it a technician? Is it a pharmacist? Is it the owner? Is it one specific person? Who is doing what part of the different activities? And ideally, how many patients should be in the service at any particular given time? Do we have space to grow? So if we are currently at an N of 10 patients per month for a service, could we set a goal of 50 patients per month? What's the reality for what that service would look like when optimized? So step 1 is to think about those elements for your service. And that thinking is very, very important. And then step 2 is to write a single sentence. You can do 2 if you need to, but ideally 1 sentence describing the service that gives a description for what it would look like for being optimized. In the folder of where all these kind of components are listed, you've got an example of one of these worksheets that has been completed by a pharmacy. So you can kind of get a sense of what we're going for here. But the goal is one description that, one sentence description that gives a sense of, in its ideal form, I would like this service to look like this. It doesn't have to be fancy language. It just needs to be tangible so we can kind of get an understanding of what are we striving for with each particular service. This is probably the hardest part of the worksheet because it asks you to think about every single service that you're offering and kind of where you want to go with that service. If it was in the maximum development that it could possibly be, recognizing that we're always trying to tweak and change, what would it look like in what you currently envision as it being idealized? So we are completing, still on this first page in this table, we are completing a single sentence description that is describing the optimized version for any of these that we've got circled or any of the services that we've written down here. Depending on how many services you have, this is going to take you longer or shorter, but this piece is very important because it's going to kind of be the bedrock and foundation for the next exercises that we're going through in this session, but also for kind of the core things that we're asking students to do. So think through, take some time, pause the video, and I will be back with you in a moment. Okay. Next, we go through and say kind of a gut check for each service. Where are we on the scale of optimization, if you will? So this is a scale that I've drafted. You do not have to use this, but ultimately, if 5 is we're good, we might need some tweaks, but we don't need any overhauls or significant changes. Or we want to kind of continue it in this iteration and see how it goes. And 1 is the service is just not working. We're not happy with it. And we really need to have some concentrated effort to make it work, or some investigation into, do we even want to be offering this service in the first place? So using this kind of scale of 1 to 5 being where are we at in terms of development, going ahead and score each one of your services here in this far left column. So a score of 5 means more optimized, score of 1 means less optimized, and you can put kind of anywhere in there. This is not something that you're going to hand me or hand anyone else. It's really for your development and development of your rotation. So long as you're consistent in this column with how you're kind of scoring different elements, you're okay. So if a 4 is a 4, you're fine. One thing that we're not doing yet is ranking or prioritizing in terms of value or importance. We are going to do that. That's very important. But for right now, what we're trying to do is take one time to really just assess everything in the pharmacy. And so we just want kind of a similar scoring rubric for each one of these services. Again, I'm going to stop talking. You can give me a pause, and then we'll be right back with you. Okay, I hope that went well. Ideally, you've got the first page completed. There's a decent chance that we are 25 minutes into this video or exercise. For some pharmacies, we may be at the 40-minute mark, and that's okay. If you've kind of zoomed through and you're at 5 minutes, either we don't have any services at all and we're starting kind of from ground zero, which is fine and wonderful, or we haven't really done that first piece and the backside's going to be really difficult. What's really going to be challenging is kind of the next video. So this is just a pause for gut check for, are we happy with how that first side looks? Do we feel like we've kind of put our efforts into it? If we are, let's go ahead and flip to the second section, which is that back page, and it looks like this. So in this table, what we want to be doing is brainstorming services that we currently don't offer, but that we would be interested in offering. And so these could be services that you've read about, that you've heard about, that you know nothing about, but somebody told you about once. It could be shoot for the stars services, or it could be kind of things that you think are realistic and logical. I encourage you to be creative and think about anything that you would like to potentially see. And I recognize in this section, I may not have crafted enough of these blocks for you. And so if you need more space here in the service title, you could either go back up and kind of draft here, or you could print off a second page. So if you're kind of in the mode of really wanting to brainstorm, my goal was to keep this to 2 pages. And so I kind of made this a little bit shorter. But again, take a couple minutes or 10 to 15 minutes if you need it, and brainstorm what services could you offer, would you like to offer. Give me a pause and we'll be right back with you. Okay, welcome back. So similar to the front page of our worksheet, we're going to go and do an optimized version of the service. And the details here may not be as easy to come by if it's a service that we've heard about, but we're not really sure what it looks like. And so do your best. Again, you're still thinking through, how does workflow work specifically for my service? So I'm not thinking workflow for dispensing. I'm thinking for this particular service, what does it look like? How does the patient get engaged? How do we recruit patients? What are the steps involved in the service? As detailed as you can. And if we say we don't really know what the optimized version looks like, then maybe your optimized version for now is it's a service that's up and running and sustainable. And that could be enough to get your students started. So I'm being a little bit broad and vague here because we have experience with services that we know, but services that we've dreamt of or are thinking about, it may be harder to kind of pin down. But again, our goal is a single sentence description for each one of the services that you just outlined that includes something that you could look at the service when it's established and say, yep, that meets my criteria of being optimized. So again, this piece is probably going to take a little bit longer from a brainstorming standpoint and kind of drafting. Again, it's very important to take this component seriously because we are using this as the bedrock foundation for where we grow the rest of our services and syllabi. The more kind of intention we put here, I swear the easier the process is later. If we're vague here, students are probably going to suffer and ultimately you won't get the bang for your buck that we could potentially out of services. So go ahead and give me a pause and come back when you're done. Thank you. Okay. So last section for this. Thank you for sticking with me this far. Take a look at the services as you have them listed. And as a last point of reflection, please think about, are there roadblocks or barriers within your pharmacy that may inhibit any service from being developed or a broad service from being developed? So this is a little bit amorphous, so I wanted to delve into it a little bit. Things that could be widespread that may impede progress of service development in general would be things like if you have a broad staff issues with things like patient engagement, staff confidence in how to approach patients to try and encourage them to look at either a new product or new service. Another example would be pharmacist competency, or what I personally have experienced more often is confidence with particular disease states. So if you really want to do diabetes education service and you've got pharmacists who they shy away from diabetes because they aren't comfortable with it, that could be something that could impede a whole cadre of different services. Other things that may be standing in your way are things like we don't know how to do documentation, or we don't have documentation streamlined into workflow. We don't have templates for how to put things that we're doing on a day-to-day basis into the documentation system, such as an e-care plan, in a streamlined fashion. If you don't have your documentation figured out at all, and people are kind of struggling with your documentation platform every time they come into contact, they may be less likely to do any other service that requires it. In the same way, if there's communication issues either within the pharmacy staff or between pharmacy staff and other people, that could potentially inhibit expansion of services. So this is sort of a gut check to think through, are there issues or areas in my pharmacy that could potentially impact multiple services that might need to get resolved before we can kind of take the next step into specific service development. It's completely fine if it's there, but what I'd like you to do is just take maybe 4 minutes, put a time parameter on this, and think through what are some of those areas that may or may not be present. If you don't have any, that's great. But in a lot of pharmacies, you're probably already writing things down if you know what the issues are, but think through what are the broad sort of areas that might need to get resolved. Go ahead and give me a pause if you need it, and then come back. Okay, the last piece here is this last question, and this question is looking specifically at the broad development areas that we've kind of put in this box. Are these issues that a student in the role of student as learner, as somebody who's maybe coming from the outside, who's not going to be in the pharmacy for an extended period, are they issues that a student could realistically affect or change or manage? And the answer could be yes, and the answer could be, well, they could help in part. So thinking through the examples, for pharmacist confidence, a student could put together a therapeutics review for diabetes. A student could go and research elements for diabetic protocols and kind of put together packets to help improve kind of the confidence of pharmacists. A student could help research communication strategies and develop exercises for practicing communication. A student may not be able to change someone's general attitude and approach to how they operate in the pharmacy. Most of the people I'm talking to, I think you guys are either owners or experienced pharmacists, and you kind of know the pieces that you need maybe authority to impact. And students who don't have authority, you could potentially be inadvertently setting them up for failure if you're asking them to be focused on some of these broad development areas. It is okay to have development areas that are broad that students can address. That's just a reality, and that's going to be fine. But take a minute to think through the areas that are in this box and what you have written here. Are there things that you need to work on either as a manager, as a pharmacist, as a preceptor, as somebody who's the leader in the pharmacy? Are there areas that you need to tackle or you need to tackle with someone else that's not a student? And if there are, maybe shift those to a different list or have those as things that we're working on, but be cognizant of them as we kind of move to the next element. So I'm going to give you just one more pause and then we'll come back with a wrap up. Okay, welcome back. Thank you for sticking with us. This has been a hopefully long and deep self-assessment with a goal of having a worksheet that you want to keep. It's something that you've put a lot of work into, and this is something that we're going to be using for road mapping potentially for a year or more. And so it's hopefully something that you understand and are pleased with. So as a refresher, we've got our 1-sentence description of the optimized version of existing services, as well as kind of a standardized score for where we're at with those services. We've got services that we're excited to provide and descriptions there. And then we've got maybe some broad areas that within the pharmacy we need to be working on, highlighting areas that could potentially be shifted to a manager or owner or pharmacist only list, and highlighting ones that would be specific for students. So I think you guys are probably needing a break. So make sure you take a solid break before we get into the next video, which is using this worksheet to develop the last worksheet, which is ultimately going to be the thing we build our syllabus with. So thank you very much for your time and attention, and have a wonderful day.